When the whistleblower complaint first came out, Democratic lawmakers called it a roadmap for an impeachment inquiry into Donald Trump. And now that map is leading in a whole new territory, with the reports that Trump pressured other foreign leaders for dirt on his political opponents too, like the Prime Minister of Australia, who, according to the New York Times, Trump called on, quote, to help Attorney General William Barr gather information for a Justice Department inquiry that Mr. Trump hopes will discredit the Mueller investigation. Just like with the Ukraine call, the White House limited access to records about this conversation, too. Then there's Italy, where the Washington Post reports AG Barr has traveled multiple times, including just last week, seeking their help in a Justice Department inquiry that President Trump hopes will discredit accusations of collusion with Russia during the 2016 election. Post says Barr has also made similar requests of British officials, all of which is sounding a lot like what Trump's personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani has been doing with Ukraine. Just yesterday, Democrats subpoenaed Giuliani, requesting any and all documents and information related to his dealings with Ukraine. They're also looking to interview several State Department officials with knowledge of the situation, a move Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is calling an attempt to intimidate and bully, adding that State Department officials will not testify before Congress, at least for now. As for the president, he appears not to know or care why whistleblower laws even exist.
We're trying to find out about a whistleblower. When you have a whistleblower that reports things that were incorrect, the call was perfect. When the whistleblower reported it, he made it sound terrible.
Now, the whistleblower's attorney says attacks like that have them concerned for their client's safety, and they're not the only ones.
Any rational person would be concerned about the whistleblower's safety after the president's comments.
Joining me to sort this out are Heather Cox Richardson, a presidential historian from Boston College, and Glen Johnson, former Globe reporter, former communications person for Secretary of State John Kerry, and the author of the book you're about to see, Windows Seat on the World. Glen, good to see you too. So Pompeo says he may not cooperate with Congress, and as I mentioned a minute ago, it's intimidating, bullying, etc. You worked for a Secretary of State. Is this unusual?
Well, I think what's unusual is that he's putting up this defense on behalf of State Department employees, one of whom the administration called back from the Ukraine, our ambassador there, and the other of whom resigned his role as special envoy to Ukraine last Friday.
Volker. Yeah.
So you're wondering why is he protecting them from something, or is he, obfuscating and preventing them from testifying on something that they maybe want to testify about?
If it's the latter, I would say, not that it's my area of expertise, but maybe it's yours. It sounds a little bit like obstruction of justice. We're in an impeachment inquiry, at least one article in both, I think, the Clinton and Nixon impeachments were about obstruction of justice. It sort of sounds like that, does it not?
Yeah, I want to point out that things are really confusing for everybody. There's so much going on. But one of the things to remember right now is that this is an impeachment inquiry. We're not at impeachment yet. It's an impeachment inquiry. And an impeachment inquiry is not a criminal investigation in which normally the state has to prove its case. An impeachment inquiry, the burden of proof is on the other side. People have to prove that they didn't do something, not the state doesn't have to prove that they did. So this is a really interesting thing that Pompeo is doing, because what it seems to me is happening, and I suspect you could speak to this, is that the Trump administration is quite deliberately setting this up as a head-to-head clash between the Trump administration and Congress and the justice system, not the Department of Justice, but America's justice system. And there's really not a need for that. So
what do you mean by there's not a need for that?
Well, it seems...
It's worked brilliantly for the
Trump
administration.
Well, that's just it. I'm sorry. Structurally, it doesn't need to... Structurally, that does not have to happen in an impeachment procedure. But they are clearly taking the stance that this is a head-to-head, and you're either with us or you're against us. And that is a rhetorical strategy. It's not necessarily necessary for an impeachment inquiry. This is becoming extraordinarily confrontational, even for an impeachment proceeding, which really does have rules that are not being followed.
Can we stay on Pompeo just for 1 second? I'm not, he is with Martha Raddatz just a couple of days ago. You'll see what she asks, and we'll get to his answer in a minute. Here they are.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that President Trump pressed the president of Ukraine 8 times to work with Rudy Giuliani to investigate Joe Biden's son. What do you know about those conversations?
So you just gave me a report about a high-seek whistleblower campaign, none of which I've seen.
Well, he may not have seen it, but it turns out the Wall Street Journal and others reported he was actually on the call. What did Corey Lewandowski said the other day? It's not illegal to lie to the press, which I guess he did. What's your reaction to that?
It's not even that exceptional for the Secretary of State to be a monitor on that kind of call. Lots of people listen in, so they have contemporaneous information about what transpired between the president and another head of state. So he didn't want to admit to something that would have been commonplace. It seemed like he was trying to obstruct or conceal something that he knew was wrong.
You know, speaking of trying to conceal or undo something, can we move to another secretariat? This is the Attorney General's office. Bill Barr is apparently globetrotting in an attempt to not only discredit the Mueller report, but to me, much more importantly, to undermine the intelligence agencies of the United States of America, who concluded unanimously that there was Russian interference in this election. The odd part of this, beyond the mission, is that Donald Trump, I think it was Bossert, the former Homeland Security guy, who said he's like Captain Ahab with Moby Dick, and Moby Dick is this election. He can't get over an election that he won. What does this say to you about Barr's?
I actually disagree with Bossert's assessment of that. He thinks it's all about Trump wanting to prove that he did, in fact, win the 2016 election, which is, we know, has been his white whale. But I think what's really going on is the attempt to discredit those 17 U.S. intelligence agencies who did conclude that Russia did interfere in the 2016 election. If you can discredit that, if you can say Russia didn't interfere, that the real problem was Ukraine, what you can do then is you can relieve Russian sanctions, which, after all, has been on the table since the RNC in 2016. That changed platform in the RNC, the change plank in the RNC platform in 2016 was a weakening of America's aid to Ukraine, and after discussions of the removing the Russian sanctions.
And you think that goal is important enough to him that he's willing to potentially incur the wrath of he being Donald Trump, his own intelligence agencies?
Well, he's been at war with intelligence for a while. Yes, I do.
You know, I don't understand how this works. I know you work, I mean, obviously, when you're working with John Kerry, you have relations with. I don't understand how careerists allow the people who work there essentially to be attacked by the President of the United States and maintain total silence. Why is there not someone there standing up, even if it means his or her position?
Well, I think the whistleblower could be put in that category. Here's somebody that's now under protection for what they did and probably cannot go back to their role, because eventually this person, who apparently was a CIA analyst detailed to the White House, is going to be unmasked, so they're not going to be any good anymore for any kind of undercover work or, and likely any analyst work. And so you have people at the State Department, which is very much an up-or-out organization, who are just trying to get through this administration and try and preserve careers, and in some cases go 25 and 30 years predating this administration.
But at the same time, the president's working to destroy their credibility.
There's been a lot of people, though, that have already left the State Department, either being fired or have left of their own design. Each one seems to go out sending a rocket, either through an op-ed or something, complaining about the way they've been treated. You
know, you mentioned the whistleblower. Here's Donald Trump talking to UN staffers in part about the whistleblower. This is a video obtained by Bloomberg. Here it is.
I want to know who's the person that gave the whistleblower, who's the person that gave the whistleblower the information? Because that's close to a spy. You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, right? With spies and treason, right? We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
Spies and treason, punishable by death in the case of treason. It seems to me that there's been this endless succession of threats from the President of the United States. And I would say, considering how deeply committed so much of the population is to this man and every word that crosses his lips, this is dangerous stuff, is it not?
Absolutely.
Or am I overreacting?
No, you're not overreacting. It's very dangerous stuff. And let's remind people that the whistleblower absolutely followed the law. The whistleblower is, this is not a question of treason or being shady or leaking or anything. The whistleblower did everything according to the books that our Congress...
As McGuire said in his congressional testimony.
And this isn't just the president saying out loud yesterday that he wants to find out the identity and meet with and confront the whistleblower.
Today, yes.
But this is also in reference to the person that gave information to the whistleblower.
Correct.
So he is saying that person he is alleging is a spy. That person is subject to the penalties for spies. And so he has two people on his radar. And if you read the whistleblower's complaint, it isn't just one other person. There's multiple people that related stories to the whistleblower about conduct that they heard on presidential calls that they thought was unbecoming the office.
We only have a minute or so left. Can we spend it on politics? Is there evidence, in your estimation, that the Democrats are up to handling this? The only two examples we have from the last few weeks was the embarrassing performance of Corey Lewandowski and, equally embarrassing in my mind, the House Judiciary Committee, who had no idea how to deal with it, and then Adam Schiff, who I admire, Intelligence Committee, telling that moronic story about a mobster when we're talking about impeachment of the President of the United States. Quickly, the Democrats shown any evidence that they have the ability to deal with everything we've just talked about?
One big answer to that, and that is that Nancy Pelosi held off impeachment until it was an absolute go. And that took
until her members forced her to go.
Well, she held them back for a very long time, the same way Tip O'Neill held back the House with Nixon back in the 70s.
So your point is she's a very savvy leader who can deal with this. Do you subscribe to that notion?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen her at work, and she was tough and waited till she had a proper set of allegations that seemed irrefutable to agree to this. And now her members were pushing her, but she held them off for just this kind of reason. She was looking for a smoking gun. She thinks she's found it. And there's somebody that he can't really deal with, and that's her. He has a hard time getting a handle on her. He doesn't call her names. He really can't try the old playbook on her because she's savvy and also now holds the levers of impeachment over him.
He deals real well with women, don't you think, Glenn? It's nice to see you.
See you.
Heather, thanks so much
Good
for your time.
to see you.
Appreciate it.